Okay, so we're jumping right back into this talk. We're about to learn the three traditions that are woven together by Plotinus to be called Neoplatonism. Obviously, one of those has to be Platonism, right? But the other two, uh, three, I know Platonism has got to be one. Then who else? There's Aristotle. And then I don't know. So let's find out.
First is this Platonic tradition. That's why it's called Neoplatonism. Plotinus would not have called himself a Neoplatonist. That's
Yeah.
our label for him. He just thought himself in the tradition of Plato and Pythagoras. But there's a spirituality that he draws from that Platonic tradition. Now, one of the symptoms of the meaning crisis is people's pervasive self-description of themselves as spiritual but not religious, which doesn't.
That's what I said. And when I heard this the first time, I was like, okay, is that what you're okay?
Mean very much at all. It sounds important, but when you ask them, do you believe in spirits? Well, no. Then what do you mean by spirituality? Well, I mean, and then, bleh. Okay. I'm going to try and specify something here. I'm going to talk about a conforming of oneself to reality in order to cultivate wisdom and meaning. And by meaning, I don't mean semantic meaning, I mean meaning in life. I mean that thing that you can point to that makes life worth living in the face of human frailty, foolishness, suffering, and its ultimate fatality. That's what I mean by meaning in life. So, a forming of one's.
Okay. Huh. Yeah, I'm way too much of an existentialist to be worried about this. But okay, it's interesting. Maybe, and for people who need to find this, this might be a way to find it.
Self to reality in order to cultivate wisdom and meaning in life. And I think Plato does a great job at that. Now, this has three core components in it. The first is a conception of reality as leveled. And here's where we'll start to get into. What does that mean? Second, a conception of the psyche as leveled. And third, a conception of the dynamic interaction between the psyche and reality that affords meaning and wisdom. I'll return to all of these in depth soon, but I want to continue with introducing the traditions to you. So the first is the Platonic tradition from which a spirituality, as I've defined it, has been drawn. The second is
Defined it. Spirituality. Oh, is this spirituality just like something that gives you meaning? Is that must be how he's using it? So a person is spiritual in this sense if they think there's something that gives meaning to life or something like that. Okay.
in science. So I hear you're starting Aristotle now, and we have to remember
what do you say?
find it has been drawn. The second is Aristotelian science.
Wait, okay.
So I hear you're starting Aristotle now, and we have to remember that Aristotelian science lasts 1,000 years.
Yeah, I mean that's an important point. This is no slouch we're talking about. This is guess everyone would have started with that, right? That's just the way it was. Holy moly, I need breakfast.
That's worth noting. Okay, what did you do today? Okay, Aristotelian science, right?
What did you do
I mean,
today? It's true. What are they? Aristotle was somebody referred to as the master of those who know, right? The teacher of those who know. So 1,000 years, Newton's reign didn't last that long before Einstein overturned them. So as far as like a way of doing science lasting for 1,000 years, now of course you could say that was bad or whatever. But by the time Descartes and those guys come around, they're trying to push off the worldview that Aristotle had. I mean, that's one way of looking at the history of philosophy, anyway. That's the way I teach it. And one can kind of see what we call modern philosophy emerging from a reaction to a reaction to this Aristotelian tradition by the people that we now think of as modern philosophers, who are trying to align their views more with what they see as an empirical, objective way of answering questions about the nature of reality associated with Descartes and Galileo and those guys. So very interesting stuff going on here.
When you start any science, even in the modern era, right, you'll get introduced to Aristotle. I mean, imagine being at a party with Aristotle. I'm really interested in physics. Here, I wrote this book called The Physics. Oh, well, I'm really interested in the psyche. Here's the anima. I wrote it. I'm interested in how animal moves. Here's my book. Poetry. Here's my book. How to write books. Here's my book. Right? That's Aristotle, okay? So you don't want to be married to Aristotle. Okay.
It's not how he taught, one would think, but okay, one takes the point. He was a know-it-all.
Aristotelian science has three components to it that are central to Plotinus.
Aristotelian science has three components to it. Obviously, the theory of the four causes. Something about induction and getting to know what the people who have thought about this know already, and then something about deduction from first principles that you arrive at through this inductive method. Man, it's been a long time since I did any of this stuff. Okay, so I can't be right, but let's see. Three things. Four causes got to be in there. That's all I know, man.
Is synoptic integration and creation of Neoplatonism. The first is a theory of causes. And you may say, well, I know what cause is. No, you don't. You know the Cartesian reduction of all causes to one type of cause. I want to bring back a notion of causation called formal.
Wait, what?
Of all causes to one type of cause. I want to.
Reduction of all causes to one type of cause by Descartes. That's a weird way to put it, I'd say. I mean, what do we have? We have our material, formal, final, and efficient. For Aristotle, they're about thinking about a process of change. In that process, something changes, something remains the same, something initiates the change, and there's a goal or target towards which the change aims or for which it's done. Those are the four causes. One way to see what Descartes does is splitting those and putting two in the mind and two in the world, or getting rid of one. Because I heard him say he wants to bring back formal cause. Formal cause, I mean, how do you, these cause, okay, so I don't know how Plotinus does this, but formal cause. For Aristotle, I mean, who knows, but it's largely something like the structure or function that the thing had, that the material has. Like if the material is a house, the house has a structure and a function. That's the form of the house, which you could see on the blueprint and in the architect's mind, etc. Okay, great. When something's falling to the ground, it's a little more complicated. Formal and final cause are related. So you might see Descartes taking final cause and efficient cause, the thing which starts the process, put in the mind. Material cause, the thing which undergoes the change out there in the world. Formal cause, maybe even that's, no, would that be in the mind for Descartes? I don't think he gets rid of it. Yeah, so he wants to bring back formal cause. But what does that even mean? Say that there's a kind of cause associated with a structure or function of something, which is related to what it's supposed to do, where it's supposed to end up. That's the connection of final cause. Okay, I don't know. So let's continue with this though, because I'm just trying to rehearse in my own mind, guys. If you already know about all kinds of Neoplatonism, that's great for you. I don't
bring back a notion of causation called formal cause that was very important to Plotinus. Mm-hmm. Second, a theory of knowing by conformity. I'm splitting it up like that because I don't want you to hear our current notion of conformity, which we usually regard as a negative thing. I want you to
Conformity. So the way you know about something is by the mind taking in the form. The mind literally takes the form of that thing. Okay.
Con, sharing, form, sharing the form. But form doesn't mean shape. It means structural functional organization. It means the formal cause. So I'm going to explain in more detail what's knowing by conformity. And then the third is an attunement relation between the two. So the way the world is structured and the way the psyche works, they attune and they can even become at one with each other. The third tradition
That's the third element of Aristotelian science. Okay.
that is taken up by Neoplatonism is the Stoic tradition. Stoicism, if I had to summarize it, and I have in a couple places, but Stoicism is basically the philosophy. But there's a debate if it's a religion or a philosophy. It's a philosophy religion or a religious philosophy of internalizing Socrates. So the way you have internalized other people, you want to internalize Socrates. Antisthenes, who was a follower of Socrates and the forerunner of Stoicism, when asked what he had learned from Socrates, he said, "I learned how to dialogue with myself." And you may say, well, I talk to myself all day long. That's not what he means. He means to be able to talk to yourself as if you were talking with Socrates.
Mm-hmm.
So
that is an important, I agree, this is an important skill. I didn't know this was associated with Stoicism. Maybe I've been reading too many Roman emperors. Does he talk about this? Stoicism. Yeah, I don't know a lot of. I know a little bit about Stoicism that I was required to know, but And I know it's been making a comeback lately, so fancy, but interesting. Internalizing Socrates, 100% agree with that. In fact, I'd go a little bit further and say that you should not only internalize Socrates, but externalize Socrates and think of every person that you meet as like that Socratic figure who's trying to push you to think about your own views. And that's sort of the source of my way of thinking about how you engage in arguments with other people. They're better versions of you trying to test your belief. So yeah, am I Stoic? I didn't know that.
what Stoicism had was three components of trying to internalize Socrates. One was the disciplining of assent, what you assent to, what you say, that is true, or I agree with that. Mm-hmm. This carries with it a notion of identification. Like it's not just sort of verbal assent, you're identifying with it. I really mean it. The second is the disciplining of desire. Socrates was famous for walking into the marketplace and saying, look at all the things I don't need. Okay,
Is
and
he
so this
famous for
idea
that?
about
From where? From the clouds? Is this from Aristophanes? Where did we get this? I mean, I can picture it, but look at all the things I don't need. Socrates wanted to ask. Okay, dude.
how much have you cultivated? And notice how this will even sound odd as it drops. How much have you cultivated a rationality of desire? Mm-hmm. Socrates is famous for saying he knew nothing. That was his. But in a special way, he knew that he did not know. That was the core of his wisdom. But that's not actually true. Socrates claimed to know things. He claimed to.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the paradox of Socrates. He did claim to know, like, lots of things, the Socratic maxims, so to speak. Yeah.
Know that the unexamined life is not worth living.
Exactly. That you can't really harm a just person. I mean, he would say lots of things, but then claim he doesn't know. Which, the way I was taught this ancient philosophy stuff, led Plato to try to come up with a theory of knowledge and try to justify his teachers' beliefs, which we think of as all these cool Socratic dialogues. But anyway.
He claimed to know ta erotica. He claimed to know the erotic things. He wasn't saying that he was great in bed. He was saying, I know what to care about.
Yeah.
I know how to properly proportion my caring and my attention.
Exactly. So when he would not dress well and, not change his clothes, etc., go to the marketplace and say, well, look what I don't need, apparently. He was trying to make a point that what you should care about are matters of the mind, matters of rationality, matters of how you should live, what kind of person you should be, rather than how much stuff you have. So that's all good stuff.
So
Eccentric.
the disciplining of assent, the disciplining of desire, and the disciplining of action. Can you do the right thing at the right time, to the right degree, for the right reasons?
Exactly. So people associate that with Aristotle, but that comes from Socrates, first of all. Aristotle has a theory of what that means. But this general idea that you do the right thing at the right time for the right reasons, it was sort of very much in a Socratic, Platonic. And Aristotle was a student of Plato's for like 100 billion years, so obviously he picked that up.
Okay, so these are the three traditions that Plotinus is going to draw together, and he's going to synthesize them.
Interesting.
Platonic spirituality, Aristotelian science, and the Socratic cultivation of virtue and agency, the capacity of self-directedness, self-cultivation. That's what I mean by agency. Okay, so now let's go back to that first stage of trying to explicate Neoplatonism to you.
Okay.
So I said Neoplatonism is a synoptic integration. All three of these traditions are not placed side beside each other. They're not, I don't want you to think of them like pieces of, parts of a chair and they're just going together. I want you to think about it more like symbiotic evolution, the way mitochondria were once separate, paramecium or something, and they entered into a symbiotic relationship to a larger bacterium, and that created the prokaryotic cell, and that made multicellular life possible. Right? Everything was changed.
As he means eukaryotic. I wondered why this little note was down here. I mistakenly say prokaryotic cell when I meant eukaryotic. So that's what he meant.
I want you to think about how each one of these traditions was reciprocally reconstructing, right, each other. They were modifying and changing each other. They were mutually maturing each other, demanding and affording each other's inherent development. So unfortunately, I wish I could speak in parallel, but I'll have to speak in sequence. But I want you to keep this, it's not this. See what my hands are doing? They're trying to capture in gesture what I can't capture in speech. Okay, the Platonic spirituality. The best way to, now, first of all, I'm going to apologize. I have not been taught ancient Greek. I was taught these terms by people who probably didn't speak ancient Greek. And so I'll probably mispronounce them. So take it as a way of feeling superior to me, so I don't, right? So I don't get, I don't want to ever lose touch with my aspiration to humility. So this is the notion of the assent, anagage. There's two places where three dialogues it's sort of discussed. The most explicated perhaps is the Symposium, which I hear you're going to be reading, but the Republic is also...
What kind of fruit fly in here? Really bothered me. Okay.
Important, and the Phaedrus also have this notion of the psyche's ascent from a world that's largely illusory to a world that is more and more real. Okay. But I'm going to focus in mostly on sort of what you get if you integrate these three different dialogues together, the vision of the ascent. It's called the ascent because of the myth of Plato's cave, which was made into a movie called The Matrix. There's a reason he's called Neoplatonism. There's a reason he's called the One. The One is the designation of the greatest reality in the Neoplatonic framework. Okay. The fact that she's Trinity says that Neoplatonism and Christianity integrated together. Ta-da. Okay, anyways. Okay. So if you know the parable, right, there's people trapped in a cave, they can't move.
I mean, I definitely agree the Matrix is like a mix of a bunch of different stuff, and that's in there. But I wouldn't say it's only that, but that's in there.
They're chained to a chair. Behind them, there's a fire burning. There's people moving back and forth talking, and they're carrying objects. The people can only see the shadows and hear the echoes, and they think they're real. That's supposed to be us. Or Neo.
No, dog, that's supposed to be you, ain't me. Okay.
Still in the Matrix. Somebody gets free. and turns around and sees the fire and sees the shadows being cast and the echoes being cast. Then moves towards the fire. And then Plato makes it clear that every time you move to this state of enlightenment, your eyes have to adjust.
Yeah.
It's initially startling. It overwhelms you. The eyes have to adjust. And then as they accommodate, you can see more of a pathway. And the escapee sees a pathway leading up. And as he's leading up, it's leading up into the real world. He's getting hit by more and more sunlight, and he has to stop, he has to accommodate, and then he can see more of the path, and he keeps doing this cycle. And he gets out, and initially he can't look around, he can only look at sort of reflections, and then he wants to try and find the source of the light and the life, and he can only glimpse it, it's the sun. And then he returns back down into the cave, and he's again befuddled because his eyes are no longer set for that dark environment, and he tries to tell his compatriots about the upper world, and they threaten to kill him because they think he's mad. Okay, so the ascent. Now, first of all, two things. The ascent is not just an ascent, it is always a return, an ascent and a return. One of the things that happened in sort of standard Platonic scholarship was an overemphasis on the ascent. Now, notice there's a cycle here. There's a movement. The world discloses more of itself. It's overwhelming. The person has to accommodate. They have to go through a transformation, and then they can see by that new light, and that allows them to move forward, and then the cycle continues. It's this looping process. You have to be really careful with Platonic mythos. Right? I do not like when they call the allegory of the cave. That's like calling Jesus' parables allegories. If somebody offers to turn one of Jesus' parables into an allegory, walk away from them, because they are misleading you fundamentally about what a parable does. The closest analog to a parable is a Zen koan. Right? A parable looks like a narrative. You take it in as a story, and you're familiar with stories, and then it blows up the whole narrative approach from the inside. Okay, same thing with the Platonic myths. They're not allegories. They're rich, and you have to dip into them and swim within them.
Why isn't that what an allegory is? Where every part of it stands for something else. Anyway, okay, whatever.
So within the Republic, the dialogue in which that allegory is set, Plato lays out the first psychology that we have. He talks about how inner conflict reveals three different levels of the psyche. Three levels that keep getting rediscovered, by the way, in the history of psychology and cognitive science. So the first level he calls the monster, and he locates it somewhere in your...
Okay, so I hear people just stirring downstairs. This is getting very interesting. I'm going to have to stop this and come back to the tripartite division of the mind from Plato. I think this is, I teach this stuff all the time. I agree that this is very interesting stuff from Plato, where he does try to actually give a theory of how the mind works in terms of, I wouldn't say levels, I would say components. But we're not talking about Plotinus here. But anyway, so it's interesting that he arrives at these three things by rational a priori reflection, and I do think it is interesting that people like Freud arrive at something similar, not exactly the same, but similar by, well, a priori empirical reflection, I guess. But I can sort of see how, I mean, I sort of thought something about the unconscious was going to come in one of these levels, but I think this is going to be very interesting. So we'll come back and we're going to do some more of this. I'm going to leave it right here for us, but I hear people just stirring downstairs, so we're not as creeping around as much anymore. But we'll get back to this hopefully soon, because I know this is a bit of a cliffhanger.